I love this industry. I could never ever see myself working in another industry. I wouldn't even know where to go. So Disneyland Paris opened, my mum took me. I remember looking down Main Street and I sort of looked up to my mum and I was like, one day, Mum, I'm going to build these.
What was the secret to successfully translating animated characters into physical experiences that resonated globally?
Their journey starts before they get to this attraction. It starts booking those tickets. Then they're planning their trip to Disney. They're buying the backpack, the ears. I mean, it's like going to a concert and buying a t-shirt. It allows to make memories. Whether I was working for Ferrari or Cartoon Network, it's always about brand protection. Enzo Ferrari famously said, you ask a child to colour in a car, they'll colour it in red.
How would you help them understand sort of what will work and what won't work and how to sort of manage any risks?
Anyone that says there are no risks is lie. Ride safety, the reputational damage is worse.
What trends are you watching most closely in the intersection of licensing and location-based entertainment? From Disney theme parks to Ferrari World, location-based entertainment transforms beloved brands into immersive experiences. But creating these magical spaces requires navigating complex approvals, massive investments, and years of development. Annabel Rochfort from Rochfort's LBE Consultancy has overseen iconic attractions for entertainment giants and luxury brands alike. Today, she reveals what it takes to bring IP to life, and I hope you enjoy. Before we dive into today's show, I wanted to share something really exciting with you. For the first time ever, I'm opening my vault of nearly 20 years of licensing experience through my online course, Learn to License. Whether you're just starting out or looking to level up your licensing game, this is everything I wish I'd known when I began my journey. From deal structures to finding the right license, knowing if you're ready and how to pitch like a pro, it's all there. The fundamentals that separate successful licensors from everyone else. Visit learntolicense.com and let's get you from curious to confident. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Annabel, you're one of the most influential voices in location-based entertainment. Although I'm a seasoned expert when it comes to licensing, this is an area that I really don't know much about. It's a real niche, and I'm really looking forward to talking today. So, Annabel, or actually, I'm going to call you Bella because we've known each other for quite a while. Welcome to Born to License.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you've built your career at the intersection of licensing and location-based entertainment. Tell me, what drew you to this unique space and how has it evolved over your almost 20-year journey?
So, should we start right at the beginning when I first went to Disneyland in Paris?
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Should we start there? So Disneyland Paris opened. My mum took me to Disneyland for the first time. I'd never went to the one in the US, and we kind of walked into the park and I remember looking down Main Street and I sort of looked up to my mum and I was like, one day, Mum, I'm going to build these, and my mum sort of like sympathetically like tapped me on the head and was like, I hope you do, darling. And I think that was the start of my career. But going into my more later life, my professional years, I started my life at Earls Court and Olympia, for those people that will remember that, actually where the licensing, brand licensing used to be held at Olympia. So I used to work there. From there, I moved on to Het Entertainment, which is now Mattel, working as a manager within location-based entertainment. I came more for the role because of the operational experience that I had as a background. I didn't really have much licensing experience. So it was a new world for me, but a world that I absolutely sort of fell into and fell in love with straight away. 4 years I was at Mattel. Then I moved from there to Time Warner, which is obviously where you and I met, overseeing the location-based business for EMEA and towards the end also Latin America as well. And from there, obviously, moved over the seas to the land of good food, Italy, where I worked at Ferrari, overseeing all of their branded entertainment. So the operation of their 2 museums in Maranello and Modena, to launching their esports tournament, to obviously reviewing and new opportunities for them and running their existing parks in Spain and Abu Dhabi.
It sounds like you're following the same story that a lot of licensing professionals, where you found yourself in this amazing industry and then you've just decided to stay in it. You've had a lot of different roles, you've done, different things, but, it sounds like you really have a passion for location-based entertainment, which is why you've stuck in it for such a long time.
I love this industry. I could never ever see myself working in another industry. I wouldn't even know where to go, to be honest now. I just love it so much. I think it's so important that we spend so much time doing our job that you have to enjoy it, and also have the added benefit of working with some incredible people who have helped me along the way and been incredible mentors to me.
So it just shows that it doesn't matter what area of licensing that you're in, even
Yeah.
if it's an area like this, it's still something that you love and you're holding on to. So tell me about, you were at Cartoon Network for 8 years, and you
Yeah.
oversaw the expansion into theme parks and water parks, cruise ships, hotels. What was the secret to successfully translating animated characters into physical experiences that resonated globally?
So I think the most important thing is taking a step back and really understanding what the company objectives are. So, obviously my role within Time Warner was one of many, many roles within that company, from people creating amazing content to advertising sales to, you doing your FMCG and, hard lines, soft lines. There's a whole kind of ecosystem within these companies, and you obviously need to not just focus on your business, but focus on the wider business. And when you take these brands and you bring them to life, it has to be in line with what everybody else in the company is doing, particularly the creative divisions driving this content. So it's true to brand. So then you come to the consumer experience, and that's very much where I sort of start to talk about the consumer journey. And what does that look like? It's kids, and I love that photo of you, by the way, with Bugs Bunny when you're a little boy and dressing up as Batman. That's the audience, right? So you're taking a brand for kids to go and engage with. So their journey starts before they get to this attraction. It starts when mum and dad, auntie and uncle, grandma and grandpa are booking those tickets online. Then they're planning their trip to Disney. They're buying the backpack, the ears, they're drawing. Then they get to the hotel. They're met by the characters. They go to their themed room. Then they leave the hotel. They go to the park. Then they have the most hopefully amazing experience at whichever park they go to, whether it's branded or not branded. There's always a consumer journey attached to that. And then from there they go home, and that sort of relationship with the brand continues, because it supports from a financial capacity. It supports the rest of the business with driving ancillary revenues, and incremental revenue streams. So obviously it would drive other revenues to support the wider business areas through merchandising, through advertising sales. So it really is a great opportunity for any brand to capitalize of free marketing, technically, in my opinion.
That photo that you mentioned of me with Bugs Bunny was actually such a special moment for me, because it was at Movie World in Australia, and it was such a big deal. I remember we went on a holiday to Queensland, which was a big deal for my family, and then we got to go to Movie World. Oh my gosh, I remember it was such an amazing experience. And if that little boy then knew that I'd be working with Bugs Bunny at Warner Brothers and working with all these characters, I think he would have been so thrilled. It reminds me of, we had the same level of excitement, but I guess the adult version of the excitement this year when I took my team to Disneyland.
Yeah.
And we had such a great time. And one of the things that was really surprising to me was walking into the retail stores and it just heaving with people, particularly to buy the Mickey Mouse ears. And I was very much taking note that almost 1 in every 2 people at the park that day had bought these ears, and they're not cheap. They were like $30-$40 a pop.
Yeah.
And half of the park were wearing them. I mean, what an amazing opportunity. I guess people are buying these so they remember. You can buy these ears, online, I'm sure, but they want the ones from the actual park, don't they? They want it from that experience.
Exactly. I mean, it's like going to a concert and buying a T-shirt, right? You go to a concert to buy the T-shirt to remember the memories, and that's something as well that's great for location-based entertainment. Is it allows families, which I think is incredible, to make memories. Going to a concert, buying a T-shirt. It's all about having those keepsakes. And the Disney ears, which you refer to, they change regularly. So people, they're almost a collector's item, particularly in the US. That they're obviously the biggest Disney market, and you can go into households there, and the mums and dads have still got 30, 40 pairs of these ears, like that have collected over the years of going to Disney. I mean, it's an incredible brand.
Let's shift gears a bit from entertainment to luxury automotive with Ferrari. That must have been a really interesting kind of change. How did you adapt your LB strategy for such a premium kind of aspirational brand? And what were some of the unique challenges that are presented?
So I always think that going to Ferrari was just kind of like big boy girl toys, so it kind of it's the same for me. It's a luxury brand. So obviously with a luxury brand, there comes complexities, which you probably don't have so much within the media world that I was used to working within. With that being said, Ben 10, when you and I were working on it, it was $1 million an episode. So, there was still this is precious cargo. Any brand is precious cargo. So whether I was working for Ferrari or Cartoon Network, it's always about brand protection, which makes sure that the brand and the experience is true. So, the consumers, they know these brands so well, particularly Ferrari owners. These guys, they know so much about the history of Ferrari. It's 77 years old now, Ferrari. Similar age to Lego, actually, which is why, hence the Lego Ferrari collaboration at Merlin, which I worked on. We used to call it Flego out of interest, but Flego. I think that it's always really important to make sure that any brand is treated in the same way, and that's to make sure that it's executed in the best possible way and the safest way.
What were some of the activations that you worked on with Ferrari that were probably different than you could have ever done with Ben 10 and other kind of entertainment properties?
So look, I think Ferrari as a brand is, it's innovative, it's thrill, it is luxury. But watching the passion that goes into building these cars, I mean, it's something like I've never seen. So kudos to Ferrari on this. But it's because of the brand. When you execute it, it aligns itself so much organically. So, from the Lego and Ferrari collaboration was my favorite that I worked on. So obviously the build and race test centers that are now at the Legolands around the world. I think there's like several now. You build your own Ferrari and then you can test it on multiple kind of little tracks and, endurance and, video mapping. And so it's really kind of engaging and it's a nostalgic brand, right? So it's got 3 generations. So you've got kids, mums and dads and grandparents, right, who want to go and work, go and interact with a brand like Ferrari, almost like Thomas and Friends as well, another nostalgic brand. So these brands, they tend to will capture a wider audience. So I think that's probably my thoughts around.
What's in it for Ferrari? I mean, ultimately their end goal is to sell cars, right? But why have LB experiences if you're a brand like Ferrari?
So look, whilst Ferrari is a luxury brand, not everyone can afford a Ferrari. But, Ferrari has thousands and thousands of fans around the world who support, whether it's through, F1, through the Tifosi, all the way through to kind of, the little boy who grows up and dreams of having a Ferrari one day. Enzo Ferrari famously said, if you ask a child to colour in a car, they'll colour it in red. So that's kind of, I think, speaks a lot about the brand and about the brand attributes. So
Bella, this year you launched Rochefort's location-based entertainment consultancy. Tell us about that, how you're helping brands today think a bit different about location-based opportunities.
So obviously over the 20 years, I've worked in this industry, there's been loads of learnings because when I started in this industry, the licensing location-based entertainment model wasn't very familiar. It was quite new. So, I've kind of been on this journey. We know a lot more about it now and media companies, lifestyle brands, they're a lot more savvy to kind of how to execute their brands. However, with that, what I have been able to do is now move into creating my own business, doing what I've always set out to do, which was obviously own my own company and applied what I've learned and by supporting other companies. So I focus on 4 core pillars. So the first pillar is that I support the licensor, so brands that are looking to go out into the industry, whether they're luxury publications, all the way through to kind of, food and beverage brands, which are actually quite big. I mean, we see successes with things like the M&M retail stores. So, anything where brands drive a revenue is really where I can help build a strategy and align. I have a lot of experience in doing that. The other thing I do is I sit on the other side. of the fence, and I can support with real estate developers, because a lot of people want to go into this business because they've seen how profitable it is. So how do they approach the licensor? What are they going to need to pay? What sort of feasibility do they need to do? Is the brand right for them? What's the awareness and affinity within the territory that they want to work in? So I can guide them and hold their hand all the way through that process. Additionally to that, I support businesses by raising capital. So a lot of these projects, sometimes they don't quite get there off the ground because they're 30, 70, 80 million short. Because I've been in this industry for a long time, I'm very lucky that I have quite an advanced network where I've been able to support some of my clients by raising capital for them so that they can open up their attractions. And then additionally to that, I look at merchandising solutions as well. So retail range plans, and really kind of like how to optimize revenue streams within the park, because ultimately, when you're doing a license agreement, they're not cheap. So, that you really want the licensee to drive as much revenue so that they feel the benefit in success, because the more revenue they drive, the more that they'll invest into their park.
What are some of the other revenue areas? I mean, obviously there's ticket sales, there's merchandise. Like what else? How else can brand owners make money at the park?
So food and beverage is the biggest margin. It's the biggest one in any theme park, is where they're driving most of their revenue from. Additionally to that, there's also everything from corporate hire, sponsorships. We look at the Pepsi Max in Blackpool, where that's obviously sponsored by Pepsi. To the Mercedes-Benz ride in Europa Park. So there's a lot of big sponsorship opportunities surrounding this as well. I think that those would probably be the key revenue drivers. Obviously beyond ticket sales.
And location-based entertainment has very much expanded from, beyond traditional theme parks into other areas. What emerging categories are you most excited about at the moment, or where do you think there are maybe some untapped opportunities?
So that's a really good question. So this is obviously my personal opinion. So I think competitive socializing for me is the hotspot at the moment. At Ferrari launching the esports tournament during COVID, it was the most organic brand extension for the business to continue to engage with their fans. So I think that there's a real power behind competitive socializing, where COVID was a big learning. So, to have that competitive socializing where you necessarily might not have to be within the attraction, you could also participate at home. So, like the F1 esports at the Tottenham Stadium, these kind of activations I think are fantastic. So I think competitive socializing is a big one. I think we're seeing a lot more around the resort destinations as well, because families now like to travel where economy is tough at the moment, right? So for a family to travel, book a hotel, book a flight, and book to go to Universal, book to go to Disney World, book to go to SeaWorld, wherever they're doing, it's expensive. So if you look at, I think the model, like if you look at what Abu Dhabi do on Yas Island, which is genius, you stay in their hotels and you get all the theme park tickets included within your stay. So I think kind of how the person responsible in the household is booking the family holiday, the group gathering away, whatever it is, I think that's something that will also be a big trend, is to kind of look to see, right, when we book this, how much more do we have to pay, or how much more can we save?
I went to an all-inclusive, actually it wasn't an all-inclusive, it was an all in the same place, a destination resort in the Bahamas, where, you'd go downstairs, Atlantis, yes, you go downstairs and you could, go on the water slide, then go back up to your room if you wanted. And it was great. I didn't have to, get a cab anywhere or anything like that. It was all there. And the beach was right there as well. It was, such an amazing experience. So you think this is something where, particularly in the licensing space, there's more opportunities to lean into?
Yeah, and I think, as again, it goes back to an internal strategy and having the right people, running this business for the company. But, you want to find the best players within the market. At Ferrari, there was never a problem about finding partners. It was always about finding the right partners. So, I think that some brands could be tempted because they're probably having to, work harder to sell their brands. I've worked for some of these brands. I'm not going to mention them, but I've worked for some of these brands which you definitely have to work harder to sell. So I think finding the right partner in the right location is the most important thing. So, if you're building something on Yas Island, you know that around you, you're going to have SeaWorld, Ferrari World, Warner Brothers, and now Disney World that's going to be opening up there in a few years' time. So, if you're a brand that can get yourself onto an island like that, it's going to be completely strategic because there's going to be continuous flow of traffic going there. If you're a brand that goes and builds in the middle of nowhere, who's going to go? I don't think it matters how good the brand is. So I think the destination, I think, is really key. High touristic destinations, I think we've seen a lot of success stories with at the moment. So where I talk about, Frameless in the UK, I think that there's it's sort of like the family entertainment centres, the 6,000 square metre within a city attraction, interactive museums, the Titanic exhibition, the Van Gogh, like all of these kind of pop-ups. I think that's an interesting space at the moment because it's a quick turnaround of revenue.
So this area of licensing is very unique for brand owners who, perhaps aren't in this space yet and they're naturally protective of their IP. How would you help them understand sort of what will work and what won't work and how to sort of manage any risks?
Look, there's anyone that says there are no risks with signing a licensing agreement within location-based entertainment is lying. So there's always a risk. You can't be responsible for someone else's child sitting behind a desk in New York or London or Shanghai or wherever you are. So
what are some of the risks?
Ride safety, that's a big one. Even though as a license agreement, you're not going to be depending upon who your lawyer is, you're generally not going to be liable financially for what happens, but actually the reputational damage is worse, right? So if you have an accident on a ride, it's awful, not just for the licensing business, but also obviously for the people that are within that attraction. So I think that's probably, for me, up there with the worst thing that could happen. I think terrorism is on the up, so you need to be a lot more, careful about how you manage your security within the park, who's going in there, who's leaving, child safety. Again, we're going to a dark place. We've seen some nasty stories in the press about that. So look, there are
how do brand owners manage that? Because obviously
yes,
they're very involved. They're not around, are they?
So they're not. It's not the brands. So listen, and this is where it goes to finding the right partner. So if you're signing a deal with Morale, who again I'm just using Yas Island as an example because I think it's an incredible operation. What they're doing there is fantastic. So you use Morale as an example. I worked with them at Ferrari. I've seen what they do at SeaWorld, at Warner Brothers. They are experienced operators. They have an incredible health and safety plans in place. They've got excellent teams there. These are the people that you want to sign with to protect your brand. There obviously needs to be a continuous communication with the partner to make sure that these health and safety guidelines are, that they're keeping to them. We often used to send secret visitors, like to go and sort of give a review. I often went to the parks myself and paid to go to Ferrari World to pay and to see how the customer service would be. Always happy to support it. Always happy to report that it was absolutely fantastic. So I think that finding the right partner is the key, and obviously educating that partner on your brand, because you're signing over your precious cargo as a licensor to somebody that probably doesn't know it or understand it as well as you do, because you work in that company, you live and breathe that brand. You're surrounded by a lot of very talented creative people who have spent so much time educating you on that brand and its core values. So it's really, really key that, you pass this on to whoever's working within the park. So I used to do a lot of the trainer manuals, about the brands. I remember working on IMG World Adventures, there was a huge recruitment drive. And because Dubai being such an international space, they had, 25 different languages, of staff speaking within that park. And some of these, the staff at the park, they'd never heard of Cartoon Network before. So, it's making sure as well that the person who's, you're buying your merchandise from, your food and beverage from, is also aware of what your brand is. Because, if you, David, is going to a theme park, to a Bugs Bunny theme park, and you go and ask, somebody about Bugs Bunny, and they're like, who's that? that's going to kind of crush your experience when you're there. So I think, it starts all the way from the very senior management as to who you're signing that contract is to the person who's, selling the tickets. So it's an ecosystem, and it's something that needs to be handled very carefully.
A quick pause here. If what we're discussing is really resonating with you, you're going to love what I've put together in Learn to License. This isn't just another course. It's 2 decades of real-world licensing experience distilled into actionable strategies you can use immediately. I've worked with everyone from startups to Fortune 500 brands, and the patterns for success are surprisingly consistent. The course covers all things that you need to consider when it comes to licensing, particularly those who are just starting out. So visit learntolicense.com. Your future licensing deals will thank you. All right, back to our conversation. So that's some great advice for brand owners, licensors that are potentially thinking about getting in this space or are already in this space and want to improve things. Let's flip it the other way around. So thinking about the operators that are looking for the ideal licensor, what red flags should they be aware of when they're looking for the right partner?
So red flags, lack of brand awareness, I think, is obviously key within the territory. You could sign with a brand that's huge in Japan, but if nobody knows it in Australia, what's the point of signing it, right? It's not going to work. So I think really making sure that brand is right for you. Once you've found that brand, looking what the brand plans are. So looking at the longevity of that brand, if it's a media brand, how much content has been greenlit for how many years? Is it going to be continue to be aired on, catch up or is it going to have a dedicated channel on Sky? What are their plans with that? What collaborations do they have coming up with that brand? And for any brand, it's looking at their future plans within their company and making sure that that company is continuously investing into that brand. Because like we've seen with cartoon brands over the years, I don't want to mention any, but I've worked on brands which were absolutely huge, doing 1.1 billion at retail, and then 3 years later, where is it? I mean, nobody knows it, and these brands are now existing in theme parks. So I think that making sure that brand has a long life is really important, which is leading on, working in both lifestyle and media. I do think that there is a strength in taking a lifestyle brand, like whether it's a food and beverage brand, again, M&M's, Haribo, these kind of brands, they're great brands, I think, but to sustain, because they have continuous investment, because they make sweets, they're always on the shelf, right? Or they have a product, they do Easter eggs, they do, whatever. So I think food and beverage brands are interesting. Movie brands, again, there's very few movie brands that we've seen that could sustain a life in a theme park for 10 years. So, I think we've obviously seen Harry Potter, incredible, but they still managed to obviously keep Harry Potter alive by bringing out Fantastic Beasts, right? So there's now kind of like the Fantastic Beasts zones. Avatar at Disney, again, an absolute ideal movie brand to put into a theme park. It's just such a beautiful film and on how it's been made. I think something like Lord of the Rings would probably sustain as well. James Bond, obviously, I think, again, a nostalgic heritage brand. I'm trying to think of other brands that I think could. Game of Thrones, it maybe not a family brand, so you'd probably obviously maybe half your audience, but I think brands of that power would also work from a movie capacity. Again, even I don't want to mention individual brands, but we've seen brands that are in very big theme parks in the US, big movie brands that did really, really well for the first couple of movies. And then again, they died. So they're kind of stuck in these parks now, and the kids just don't really want to go because they don't know what the movie is. It hasn't, they're just not of interest to them.
So your advice is to really identify a brand that has longevity. I mean, in terms of timing, and this is going to be a difficult question to answer because I know it's very much on a case-by-case basis, but if somebody right now is thinking about, let's say, opening a theme park and they're thinking about what IP they want to work with, how long will it take from now to when they actually incorporate the IP into the theme park? Is it 4 years, 6 years, 10 years?
So, okay, look, it's different depending on obviously how big the attraction is. So, if it's a small scale attraction of 4 to 5,000 square meters, you could probably do a licensing agreement within 6 months. And then, if you own the building already, so say you've got a shell of a building, you just need to fill it. It would depend on the ride lead time. The ride vendors are busy at the moment. I think that they have like an 18 to 20-month lead time. Some of them 2.5 years at the moment. So again, it depends on the lead time of the manufacturing. So I think, for a smaller setup, you could probably get something open if you owned that land. This isn't the ideal situation that you own that land and you have your funding. So you have all of those, the two most important things. Then obviously you can probably get something open 5 to 6,000 square meters. I would say 2.5 to 3 years. If you're doing a park, like let's talk about something big, like IMG World Adventures. Let's talk about something of that scale, or which we both worked on. So IMG World Adventures, again, a huge theme park. I mean, it's the largest indoor theme park in the world until SeaWorld opened on Abu Dhabi last year. That took 4 years to open. So again, IMG did an absolutely incredible job of building one of the first theme parks in the UAE. It was open before Dubai Parks and Resorts opened, so they had a big amount of education to do with the government about the infrastructure, actually having these facilities. So these things can take 4 to 5 years. A license agreement for a park of that scale, depending on how nice the person is you're dealing with and how good your lawyers are, I think you could have a license agreement done within 6 to 9 months. But within that period, again, depending on who you work with, there might be an MOU before you actually get the license agreement where you would have to hit a certain amount of KPIs. So I try to answer that in the simplest way possible, but there's no rate cards for this business, which is actually why I love it, by the way, right? It's not like this is how we do things. Like the business is flexible. License agreements have to work on both sides. So, if a licensor charges a licensee too much money, then the licensee isn't going to feel any benefit from that. They're just going to feel very, a bit begrudging towards the licensor. And therefore, they're not going to have any money to reinvest into the park. And then the park starts looking tired because they've got this big high license fee. Then you go to the other side where, for the licensee, where you want to give them a financial model which is fair. So, during the build phase, they have a construction. It's a construction period. And within that, all they're doing technically is paying for the licensing rights. But again, I think that I'm quite a nice person to negotiate with. I think there might be other people out there who could do it a bit tougher than me. I've always been quite fair. So I think, it works on both. It's a negotiation. It's a dance. So.
Yeah, from what I'm hearing from that answer is that there's no quick wins in this space. And that's why if you're wanting to, be in this space, finding the right IP is so important, and not focusing just on what's the hottest kids brand right now, what's the hottest film franchise right now. You have to be, where is the puck going? You have to be what's going to be popular in 4 or 5 years time and have that longevity.
And I also think, as a licensee, if you're going into this business, with a fresh, and you haven't been into this space before and negotiated with licensors, it really, really does benefit to work with somebody who has done this and who knows how to negotiate it, because although those people can sometimes look expensive, they will save you, if not millions of pounds in the future. So if you negotiate a license agreement in the right way, in the future it will work out much, much cheaper for you. So I think, thinking that you can just do it and it's not that hard, it is hard. There's a way of doing it. And the people, because I've been one of these people who has sat on the licensor desk, there's a way that you can navigate around a contract to make sure that you're getting revenues from every area. But it's also works on the other side, where you can push the IP owner to get more out of them. So I think that it's a dance on both sides.
Brand approvals. So, once a license is signed, it's not a matter of like, oh, okay, here's the license. Now you can do whatever you want with our IP. No, there is a very strict approval process for product development, approvals, so forth. Can you take us through that in a bit more detail?
So look, the first thing we always have are brand Bibles, which are great. So, where we can pass those over to our clients. Hopefully, if you have a very good license agreement, you would have had approval over the design firm, and that they're working with a great design firm, which will make your life much easier. So, PGAV, Falcons, Foric, these guys, they've worked with brands forever. So, you work with these guys, they understand how precious brands are. I'd say 9 times out of 10, they've probably worked on that brand already. So I think finding, a design firm who's used to working with brands is really, really important. Approvals process internally. Now that's interesting. So again, it's all about the company setup. It's all about the resource that you have. So, smaller companies are probably not going to have a dedicated team to run these approvals. Bigger companies will probably have a huge team running these approvals. So, I think making sure that you're aligned internally on the execution of the brand, and you have full approval over everything. I mean, from my experience, any contracts that I worked on, I always made the agreements where you'd have to purchase rides from Europe or the US. So, because we knew that those rides would conform to certain health and safety standards, and that they would be a safe ride for our guests. And then obviously, from that perspective, you go down to kind of like the merchandising. So again, there's always going to be a great team in place to support with the retail range plan, make sure that you have everything from the pocket money spend all the way up to kind of like the collectibles. But the approval process is long. It's not kind of like having a pad, if you sign it, or an Easter egg where you can approve the design of the Easter egg, it goes off to manufacturer, and then the distribution goes into the supermarkets and it looks after itself. You just buy it. This is a continuous journey. So, it really is kind of like bringing up a child, building a theme park, nurturing it all the way to sustain and maintain, really.
And of course, it doesn't stop once it's live, does it? There's more work to do after that.
Always, you have to maintain the visitation. How do you maintain repeat visitation? How do you get new visits? How do you maintain, good TripAdvisor reviews? All of these things are really important. And that's why it's always very dangerous when brand owners overcharge for their brand, because, you need to let these parks invest money into new attractions, new zones, new collaborations, all of these things to make sure that the park is profitable and successful.
One thing I think that those listening will want to know, who, given your experience in this space, and you've worked in a lot of areas within the LBE arena, is there a specific project that has really changed how you approach LBE, and was there anything that you can share about what it taught you?
Yeah, look, I think Ferrari for sure was a change for me. We spoke about kind of the luxury brand, even though I think all brands are precious. Ferrari arguably is probably the number one brand in the world. Sort of between Lego and Ferrari tend to fight for the number one position. So I think going into a brand with that power was probably made me, I would say, more cautious. Obviously, when you have a brand like Ferrari, where you have two different demographics, so you have the Ferrari owners, these guys know the brand, they're diehard Ferrari fans, they own Ferraris, they have collections of Ferraris. And then you have the other side, which is the more aspirational, they want to own a Ferrari, they follow Ferrari, they love to look at Ferraris, so, you have two very different demographics of people who still want to come to the attraction. So you need to make sure that both of these demographics are having a great time. If you're working with a media brand, you have one demographic, and that's just somebody who just loves a show. They love a movie, right? So for me, this is the major difference.
So how do you do that? How do you create an experience that benefits the Ferrari owners, but also benefits the aspirational Ferrari fanatics? Is it different experiences, or are you just trying to find the same experience that services both of these types of people?
It's a really good question. Again, I can give Ferrari World as an example. So Ferrari World, full of great attractions, loads of amazing Intamin roller coasters. But what also was at Ferrari World was we used to, when I was in when I lived in Milan and Maranello, which is obviously the headquarters for Ferrari, we had the museums, and in order to have new visitations to the museums, we would have different pop-up exhibitions about focusing on Ferrari and fashion, Ferrari in the 60s, Ferrari. So once we'd done these pop-up exhibitions, we would then take them to Ferrari World. So there would be this kind of element of a museum within Ferrari World where people, the people who wanted to really go and see the history of Enzo Ferrari, really feel the brand rather than the speed, and the entertainment side would still have that feeling. So I think that's an example of how we worked on it at Ferrari, I think, for sure.
So it's an example of really both the aspirational person and the Ferrari owner would both go there and enjoy because they're seeing the history of the brand that they love so much.
Yeah, and the cars. So like you could even look at the demographics who are visiting the Ferrari museum. So some people would just be driving past and think, oh, look, there's a Ferrari museum, well, let's go and have a look. They'd probably whiz around that museum in about 30 minutes and, ooh and ah at all the cars, and that would be the end of that. And they'd buy some Ferrari merchandise and go on their way. Then you have the fans who have planned this trip, right? They've planned their food trip around Modena, they've planned what they're going to do. And these guys will spend 2-3 hours in the museum reading everything, photographing everything. They're on their phones, they're looking at the cars, they're looking at who was racing, they're taking their photo with every single car in there. So you have to cater for both audiences. But you do it in a subtle way so that, there's interactive elements in the museum which kids can touch. That a kid comes in, they see one red car and then they're kind of a bit like, oh, more red cars. So, you have to keep the interactiveness going. So, there's things that they can touch as they go round. They can feel the steering wheels, it's just, change a tire on an F1 car. Try out driving in a virtual Ferrari, all of these kind of things. So it's making sure that there are subtle nods to the luxury, to the brand, but ultimately, these are still entertainment facilities.
Let's look ahead to 2026 and beyond. What trends are you watching most closely in the intersection of licensing and location-based entertainment?
I think the US, they do parks great. They have done for years. They're quite oversaturated with theme parks. The US, I think that there'll be more high touristic destinations popping up around the US. I think that I'm very interested to see what happens in the Middle East, particularly Saudi Arabia, because I think that it's fair to say that most licensors have probably got a contract signed there now. So let's see how many of those actually get open. I think it's an interesting market to watch. I think, again, China was a good learning. A few years ago, China was booming. And now, I think the location-based entertainment business in China is very, very challenging to work on. So that's kind of what I look at from a territory perspective. I think from a trend perspective, again, I'm going to go back to competitive socializing. I love these attractions. They're scalable, they're interactive, they make people come out of the home. They guarantee return visitation because people want to beat their top score. They want to go there with their mates and beat their mates' score, So I think competitive socializing is a big one for me. I also am a big fan, and I've only seen a couple of examples of it done really well, of interactive food and beverage. So I think that, we've seen successes with the M&M store, right? But I think the interactive food and beverage where, Secret Cinema do one with, you watch a movie and they align the movie with the food that you're eating. I think that this kind of experience is what people are looking for now. Generations have changed. When you and I were young, we were just very happy to maybe go down to the pub, or if we got money, we'd save up to buy something, right? We'd buy, whether it be a toy or a handbag or shoes or whatever, you would want to buy something. The generations we have now, they don't want to buy that. They want to have an experience. So I think, focusing on how you can drive experience through in a subtle way by going out on a Friday or a Saturday night, I think that that's really interesting. Hotels, definitely hotel resorts. We've seen successes with the Nickelodeon hotels, Monopoly hotels. So I think that that's a space to watch with resorts. I think that was the area where a lot of IP owners were most cautious about, but I think that there'll be a lot of themed hotels on the way. I'm working on a few at the moment with some of the brand owners. So I think that that's kind of quite a hot spot to watch as well. That's quite a big answer. That was quite a big answer.
Yeah, no, a lot to take in there. I mean, the only thing I was thinking of, particularly when you talk about food experiences, was thinking like, if there was a Vegemite experience, in Australia.
Marmite. Marmite.
Well, you go to the Marmite experience. I'll go to the Vegemite experience, and we can compare notes. But my
We did
I
have a do you remember we did actually have a Marmite Vegemite taste off you and I once?
I don't remember what was
Right.
was it that I was giving you Vegemite and you were giving me Marmite?
Yeah, and then we had to guess which was which. We both guessed correctly, and we both agreed that Marmite was better, but you agreed that Vegemite was better. So we both
Yeah,
shut smells gone.
as expected. But I actually still really like Marmite. Up in my kitchen, I do have Marmite and I do have Vegemite as well.
Yeah, I love Marmite. Big fan.
Marmite's my emergency. If I run out of Vegemite, then at least I've got something that tastes
Something there.
like.
Well, like I mean, you talk about Marmite. I mean, this is going a bit off piece with LBE, but I mean, what Marks and Spencer's, the collaboration that they're doing at the moment with Marmite mac and cheese balls, Marmite pizza, Marmite mac and cheese. I mean, like it's an incredible brand, Marmite.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's coming up to my lunchtime. I'm getting really hungry just speaking about that. So now that you're running your own consultancy, Bella, tell me what kind of things are you finding that you're able to do that you weren't able to do in previous roles?
So obviously I can now go on the licensee side. I've always been representing mega companies, so my job has obviously always been to sit on one side of the desk, but sitting on that side of the desk has now allowed me to hopefully also support the other side. So I feel like I sound like Darth Vader, like turning to the dark side, but or turning to the light side, I should probably say. So I can now support partners with those licensing agreements, finding the best brand, looking at the feasibility, working with the design firms, sourcing the best design firm for their project, so that's kind of something that I can definitely do now. Raising capital is a new area for me. But there were so many times where I was sitting in these roles where I would be talking to some very wealthy kind of, prince of blah, blah. And they'd be like, oh, we'd like to invest. Have you got anything? And of course, within those roles, I could never, ever say, oh, yes, why don't you go and speak to X, Y, Z? Now I can. So now I can help these companies, working with a couple of major sports brands at the moment, to help them raise capital. So, now I can do that as well. And the most important thing is I could get a dog, which I've never been able to do.
But why? So why does that mean you can get a dog now?
My work-life balance is so much better. I've done 20 years. At Ferrari, I worked out I was doing around 120 flights a year. So these jobs they're big, they're traveling. I can do most of it now from home. I'm very happy to travel when I need to, but I now have a life where I have a work-life balance, which I don't think I've had for quite a long time, because I've always kind of, I was definitely more of a slave to my job. Whereas now I'm more on my own terms. And I guess that also comes with, you're the boss, so you set your own strategy, so in everyone knows, right? It's no secret. And it's not just companies that I've worked for. It's all corporate companies. There's always politics within those companies. When you work for yourself, there are no politics, because you don't allow there to be politics. And if, I get freelancers in occasionally to help me with design work, there are no politics. So I think that, that automatically makes 40% of your day go. I think 40% is probably, if you ask most corporate people, they would tell you that they spend 40% of their time managing politics internally.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly found that since I started my agency 11 years ago, is that I'm very mindful of everybody's time, and it does allow me more flexibility. We're a remote first company, so we don't have to worry about commuting. We try and not get bogged down in internal meetings and those kinds of things. And that really helps. I mean, it must be so exciting for you. This is obviously an area that you're really passionate in and has been, the biggest part of your career. And now suddenly the scope of location-based entertainment has grown so big, because when you're working at Ferrari and Cartoon Network, they were amazing brands, but you're just focusing on that. Whereas now, the scope is enormous.
Yeah. So look, I'm under NDA, so I'm not allowed to say it on a podcast, but I'm representing some fairly big brands at the moment, in terms of licensing capacity and helping them roll those brands out and sourcing partners for them. That's massively exciting for me, that I can kind of like work with different areas, and again, apply I've had a lot of help over the years. This 20 years of learning from lots of great people. I could spend another hour thanking all of those people. They know who they are anyway, they're listening. But a lot of people have helped me through my career, and I can now do the same. I'm doing a lot of mentoring on the side as well, which I find really rewarding. And setting up my own company has been completely terrifying, because all of a sudden, and as I'm sure you don't have a lawyer sitting next door, and you don't have an amazing franchise management person sitting in the other room, and you don't have a content creator or a slide formatter or a PA. All of a sudden I'm kind of doing everything. So, this is a learning as well, but
It's all on you. Yeah.
it is all on you, but it's super exciting. And it's also, doing it your way, rather than kind of, the amount of meetings that I've sat in with, like, but this is how we do things. And I'm just like, yes, but this doesn't make sense to do it this way. No, but this is how we do it. And I'm like, okay, fine. But now, you're in a place where I can just work. You can work smarter when you work for yourself, for sure.
Well, it's so exciting. I wish you all the very best for the consultancy.
Thank you so much.
Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
So I should have mentioned that I work very closely with IAPA. So I'm on the IAPA Educational Committee. So I'll be in Barcelona in September from the 20th to the 25th. I'll then, of course, be at IAPA in Orlando as well in November. And the brand licensing show in October. It's like trade show season for us at the moment. I'm also available on LinkedIn. So if anyone wanted to reach out or catch up or have a coffee, I prefer a glass of wine. I think it's far more civilized. But if anyone would like to meet up at any of the trade shows, then I'd be happy to.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thanks, Bella, for joining us on Born to License.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I hope that was a little bit interesting anyway.
Of course, it was. Thanks so much. We'll speak soon. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Born to License podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're eager to learn more about licensing, I encourage you, take a look at my course, Learn to License. I've condensed almost 20 years of learning in my licensing career to help others understand how licensing works. And as a reward for sticking around, here is a discount code for you to put in. I hope to see you there.